Good evening. We have two major developing stories tonight that raise fundamental questions about government accountability and the limits of presidential power. First, escalating military tensions in the Caribbean as the Trump administration seized a third oil tanker off Venezuela in just 3 days. The U.S. has now dispatched its largest military armada to South America in decades, and we're getting reports that a third vessel is currently being pursued. The blockade Trump announced is unprecedented in its scope and raises serious international law questions. White House correspondent Selena Wang reports from the State Department with the latest. Then, in a stunning reversal, lawmakers from both political parties are now furious with the Trump administration over how it's handling the release of the Epstein files. Congress passed a bipartisan law with overwhelming support, 427-1, demanding complete transparency. But the Justice Department released only a fraction of documents, with massive redactions, and even removed files from the public website after posting them. Investigators Olivia Rubin has details on the growing bipartisan outrage. Let's go to Selena Wang first with the Venezuela developments. Thank you. Breaking news from the State Department tonight. U.S. military forces have seized a second Venezuelan oil tanker in international waters and are currently pursuing a third vessel. The escalation marks a dramatic intensification of President Trump's pressure campaign against Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, and it's raising serious questions about whether the United States is operating within international law. Here's what happened in the past 72 hours. On Saturday, December 20th, early morning, the U.S. Coast Guard, with support from the Department of Defense, boarded an oil tanker called the Centuries, which was carrying 1.8 million barrels of Venezuelan oil. This was the second such operation in less than 2 weeks, following the December 10th seizure of an oil tanker called the Skipper. The operation was dramatic. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem released video footage showing a helicopter hovering just above the tanker's deck as U.S. military personnel descended. Noem posted, "We will find you and we will stop you." But here's where legal concerns emerge. The Centuries is not under U.S. sanctions. This is critical. While the Skipper was formally sanctioned, the Centuries appeared to be operating legally according to maritime shipping databases. This shows that the Trump administration considers almost all oil tankers carrying Venezuelan crude to be subject to seizure, whether sanctioned or not. Now, sources tell us that the U.S. military is actively pursuing a third oil tanker called the Bella 1, a Panamanian-flagged vessel sanctioned by the U.S., which was en route to Venezuela. So in 72 hours, we're looking at 3 separate operations targeting Venezuelan oil. The military buildup itself is staggering. Trump has deployed what he called the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America, including 11 Navy ships, an aircraft carrier, several amphibious assault ships, and multiple helicopter and patrol aircraft. Trump has said this armada will only get bigger and warned the shock to them will be like nothing they have ever seen before. Venezuela's response has been sharp. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez called the seizures theft and hijacking and acts of international piracy. Venezuela has announced it will file complaints at the United Nations Security Council. International law experts are alarmed. Venezuela's defense minister, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, said the blockade flagrantly violates the United Nations Charter and constitutes a clear act of aggression. Under the Hague Conventions, a blockade is considered an act of war. A 1961 Justice Department memo noted that while a president could theoretically institute a blockade of Cuba, a blockade is a belligerent act, which, as a matter of international law, is ordinarily justified only if a state of war, legal or de facto, exists. The United States is not at war with Venezuela. More alarming, the administration's stated rationales for these operations are inconsistent. Trump has cited both drug trafficking enforcement and recovering oil assets that American companies lost when Venezuela nationalized its oil industry decades ago. Trump posted, "Venezuela is completely surrounded. Until such time as they return to the United States of America all of the oil, land, and other assets that they previously stole from us." So the justifications shift. First, it was combating narcotics, then it was getting back Venezuelan assets, then it was stopping sanctioned oil. Critics argue the real goal is regime change. In fact, the U.S. military campaign has killed at least 104 people in 29 alleged drug strikes since September 2025, and U.S. officials have indicated regime change is the actual objective, with White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles suggesting that ousting Maduro is the administration's real goal. Here at the State Department, officials are defending the operations as necessary to counter drug trafficking and terrorism, but lawmakers and international observers are increasingly skeptical. The question is, does the president have constitutional authority to unilaterally blockade a foreign country, seize vessels in international waters, and conduct military strikes, all without congressional approval? That question will be tested in the coming weeks as this standoff continues. For now, the military pressure on Venezuela is intensifying, and the legal questions remain unresolved. Reporting from the State Department, I'm Selena Wang.
Thank you, Selena. The State Department is saying those operations are lawful and proportional, but international law experts and members of Congress disagree. Now we turn to our second major story tonight: growing bipartisan outrage over how the Trump administration is handling the release of the Epstein files. Investigative reporter Olivia Rubin has been examining why lawmakers from both parties are now threatening impeachment against the Attorney General. Olivia, what did you find? Thank you. What we're finding is a remarkable breakdown. Congress passed bipartisan legislation with overwhelming support, 427-1 in the House, unanimous in the Senate, demanding the Trump administration release all Epstein files by December 19th. President Trump signed it into law, but what the Justice Department delivered Friday was something very different from what Congress mandated. Let me walk through exactly what happened. The law required the Attorney General to release all unclassified records related to Epstein by December 19th. The deadline was explicitly stated in the legislation. On December 19th, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche announced that only a partial batch would be released that day, with more to follow over the next couple weeks. That was a violation of the law. Congress was clear: all unclassified records by December 19th. The DOJ released only a portion. According to Deputy Attorney General Blanche's letter to Congress, 187 attorneys reviewed the documents, along with a quality control team of over 25 lawyers. They found over 1,200 names of victims and family members, which are redacted. Blanche stated, "Protecting victims is of the highest priority for President Trump, the Attorney General, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Department of Justice." But here's where it gets problematic. Entire pages of documents were completely blacked out from top to bottom. The Justice Department withheld far more documents than required by law. And critically, the law states, no record shall be withheld, delayed, or redacted on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity, including to any government official. So redacting to protect victims is legitimate. Redacting to protect politicians, that's illegal under the law Congress passed. Let me show you what we found. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer pointed to a 119-page document in the files that was completely blacked out. We investigated that document. It appears to be grand jury testimony from the Epstein investigation. That's not protecting victims, that's protecting the investigation or hiding evidence. At least 550 pages worth of documents were released entirely blacked out. That's not transparency, that's the appearance of transparency. Now, the bipartisan reaction has been swift and furious. Representatives Thomas Massie, a Kentucky Republican, and Ro Khanna, a California Democrat, the bipartisan duo who spearheaded the effort to pass this legislation, expressed frustration with the Justice Department. Massie called the release disappointing and in a post on social media highlighted the exact language of the law, not later than 30 days after the date of enactment of this act, and all. Massie made clear, the law says all, not most, not some, all. Khanna posted that the DOJ's effort failed to comply with the law and warned that officials responsible could be impeached, held in contempt of Congress, or referred for prosecution. But the really striking part is this: there's a specific category of documents the law requires to be released, a list of all government officials and politically exposed persons named or referenced in the released materials, without redactions. The DOJ was supposed to list every government official mentioned in the Epstein files, with their names visible. Instead, many names are still redacted. Why? The law anticipates that government officials were connected to Epstein and that the public needs to know who, but the DOJ is using victim protection as a cover to keep those names hidden. We also found something disturbing. Multiple photos were initially released, then removed from the DOJ website without explanation. At least 16 files disappeared between Friday afternoon and Saturday morning. One photo contained Trump alongside women and was part of Epstein's desk display. The explanation from the DOJ was that the photos contained unredacted images of victims, so they needed to remove and repost them with redactions. But if that were true, why post them without redactions in the first place? The selective removal suggests something other than systematic victim protection. Finally, the political dimension. Trump's book, The Art of a Deal, appears on Epstein's bookshelf in the released photos, but the photos of Trump, who appears multiple times in the materials, are being heavily edited or withheld. A Clinton spokeswoman even accused the Trump administration of shielding themselves from what comes next, or from what they'll try and hide forever. What we're seeing is not compliance with the law Congress passed. It's selective release designed to protect politically sensitive material while appearing to comply with transparency demands. The law was crystal clear: all unclassified records, complete redaction for victim identification, and no withholding based on embarrassment or political sensitivity. The DOJ has violated those requirements on multiple counts. This is Olivia Rubin. Olivia, thank you. So we have the Justice Department claiming it's protecting victims, but bipartisan lawmakers saying it's violating the law. We've reached out to the Department of Justice and Attorney General Pam Bondi for comment. They have not yet responded, but Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche did tell NBC's Meet the Press that more documents would be released in the coming weeks. The question is whether those future releases will comply with the law or continue the pattern of selective redaction. Both of these stories, the Venezuela blockade and the Epstein files, reveal a common theme: questions about whether this administration is operating within constitutional and legal bounds. In Venezuela, we're asking whether the president has authority for a unilateral military blockade. With the Epstein files, we're asking whether the Justice Department is complying with a law Congress passed. In both cases, the administration is asserting broad powers, and in both cases, there's significant opposition, internationally on Venezuela and bipartisan on the Epstein files. When we come back, we'll have more on both stories, including reaction from House Democrats and international affairs analysts. Stay with us.